Today's going to be a little bit of a different video because in this bag is roughly 1,090% silver Washington quarters. Now we're going to sort this bag and look for key dates, better condition coins, and much more. Let's get into it. Hi guys, and welcome back to another video. In this bag is roughly 1,090% silver Washington quarters. Now we're going to sort this bag and we're going to be looking for any of the key dates, better condition coins, older quarters like Standing Liberty quarters and Barber quarters, mint errors varieties, and proofs. Now we're going to sort this bag by the handful, so I'll give you a recap of handful number 1. Alright, the first handful is done. Here are the quarters from the 60s, 50s, 40s, and we had a couple from the 30s. We also found a Buffalo nickel, 1920 Philadelphia, and a pretty nice 1964 Denver. Now let's move on to handful number 2. Alright, the second handful is done. That was a really good handful. Here are the quarters from the 60s, 50s, 40s, and 30s. We had a pretty nice 1952 Denver. We had our first Standing Liberty quarter, no date, but it is a type 2. And we even had a Mercury dime, 1943 Philadelphia. Now let's move on to handful number 3. Just got done with the third handful. Here are the 60s, 50s, 40s, and 30s. We even had a silver Canadian quarter, 1968. And two nicer ones from the 50s, a 52 Denver and a 59 Denver. Now let's move on to handful number 4. Just got done with the fourth handful, and this was an amazing handful. Here are the 60s, the 50s, the 40s, and the 30s. We had three nicer 64 Denvers, a really nice 1954 Denver. We had another silver Canadian quarter, 1964. And we found a key date. 1936 Denver is one of the Washington quarter key dates with only 5.3 million minted. It is the highest minted key date, but still, we found one of the key dates. It might have been cleaned or polished at one point, but still an awesome find. Let's move on to handful number 5. Just got done with the fifth handful. Here are the 60s, 50s, 40s, and the 30s. We did get one SLQ, and this one is dated. It's a 1929 Denver in pretty good shape. Now let's move on to handful number 6. Just got done going through handful number 6. Here are the 60s, 50s, 40s, and the 30s. And we did have another silver Canadian quarter from 1965, and a bunch of nicer condition ones. A 1964 Philadelphia, a 53S, a 54 Denver, a 59 Denver, and a 54S. Now let's move on to handful number 7. Just got done with handful number 7. Just a few handfuls left in the bag. Here are the 60s, 50s, 40s, and the 30s. Let's move on to handful number 8. Handful number 8 is done. Here are the 60s, 50s, 40s, and the 30s. We did have some nicer quarters, two 1964 Philadelphias and a 57 Denver. We also had a silver dime, 1964 Denver. Now let's move on to handful number 9. Got done with handful number 9. About 3 or 4 handfuls still left in the bag, but here are the 60s, the 50s, the 40s, and the 30s. Now let's move on to handful number 10. Just got done with handful number 10. Here are the 60s, 50s, 40s, and the 30s. We did have one more SLQ quarter. It doesn't have a date and it doesn't have a mint mark, but it is a type 2. Now let's move on to handful number 11. Got done with handful number 11. Here are the 60s, 50s, 40s, and 30s. We have a pretty nice 1953 Denver and a pretty nice 1964 Denver. And we have this 1937 Denver. It's not as nice as these two, but it is pretty nice for its age, and it does have some good detail, and it only has about 7 million minted. So, 3 pretty good finds. let's move on to handful number 12. Just got done with handful number 12. Here's handful number 13, and the bag is empty. Here's the 60s, 50s, 40s, and the 30s. Now let's move on to the last handful, handful number 13. All right, just got done going through the last handful. Here are the 60s, 50s, 40s, and the 30s. So now what we're going to do is sort all of these bins by date. So 1932 to 1964. And we're going to start it off with the 60s, so 1960 to 1964, and I'll bring you in when this bin is empty. All right, just got done going through all of the 60s. Here is all of the 1964s. There is a lot of them. Here are the 63s, 62s, 61s, and 1960s. Now let's go through the 50s bin and sort them by date. All right, just got done sorting all of the 50s by date. Here are the 59s, 58s, 57s, 56s, only a couple of 1955s, 54s, 53s, 52s, 51s, and 1950s. Now let's sort through the 40s and sort them by date. Alright, just got done with the 40s. Here are the 49s, 48s, 47s, 46s, 45s, 44s, 43s, 42s, 41s, and 1940s. Now let's go through the 30s bin and sort them by date. Alright, just got done sorting through all of the 30s. Here are the 39s, no 1938s, 37s, 36s, 35s, 34s. They did not mint 1933s and a couple of 1932s. So let me clean up the board and then we'll do a recap of this 1,000 silver Washington quarter hunt. Alright, here is the wrap-up of this 1,000 silver Washington quarter hunt. We had 3 silver Canadian quarters, a 1965, a 1964, and a 1968. We did have 1 non-silver Canadian from 1975. You saw all of the nicer quarters from the 50s and 60s. We had 3 Standing Liberty quarters, including a dated one, 1929 Denver. We had a pretty nice 1937 San Francisco, and we did have a key date, 1936 Denver. That's awesome. 2 silver dimes, a 1964 Denver, and a 1943 Philadelphia Mercury dime, and we even had a Buffalo nickel, 1920 Philadelphia. So for this 1,000 silver Washington quarter hunt, it was an amazing hunt. So thank you guys so much for watching, and keep on collecting.